Good morning. Thank you, Andrew. Welcome to First Parish, Northboro, a Unitarian Universalist community. It is our intention here to be a beacon of progressive religious thought in Central Mass. I've written a bunch of novel things that we can say about ourselves. You'll hear from Worship Associates. And we're proud to be an intentionally welcoming community open to people of all races, different religious backgrounds, gender, sexual identities. Basically, everyone's welcome here. We try not to leave anyone behind. Plug for this upcoming song. I want to issue a warm welcome to any new folks. My dad is new here today, so greet my father, Norman, sitting next to Celia there. First-timers should not feel obliged to contribute to the offertory when it arrives. You're a guest today. Please join us for coffee hour and conversation in the parish hall. There's also a theological discussion after church today, starting about 12:15 or so, probably meeting downstairs over there. It's also Friday's the penultimate coffee hour. Does anybody else have any other announcements to share? Potluck, sorry. I believe this is on here. There's a green light on. I'll turn this one on too. Funny, people generally say they'd rather not hear me. Go ahead, Gordon. Yeah, it should work. Yeah.
Well,
all right. Tell us what it is.
Must be burned out.
I'll repeat it.
Just bring up to date with the repainting and replacing rotted wood on the facade of this building. It looks different today than it looked a week ago, and basically most of it's been primed and repainted, well, scraped, primed and repainted, and then a couple of days ago the carpenters replaced rotted wood, and that's where it is. So tomorrow's not a work day, plus it's supposed to rain, but Tuesday presumably the painters from the contractor will come back and finish it up Tuesday. So after that, it'll all be done. So
there we are. It's great. Okay. I think that's all for announcements. Anyone have anything they want to squeeze in? It's a good time to do it. Okay. Now with those logistics behind us and our cell phones turned way up, just in case, we wouldn't want to miss a conversation in the next hour. Yes, that's a sarcastic prompt. I will invite you to greet your neighbor. That's the kind of song you would walk around New York City hand in hand with your lover, right? Our chalice words are simple. They are that life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of that great gift. Today is about Article 2. It's kind of a redo. I know Linda brought us an explanation and an understanding of it. I took a different twist. I stepped back a little bit. I explained Article 2 just so we get it, and I'll say more about what it all is. It's a very covert name filled with conspiracies. No, not filled with conspiracies. And I'm going to take a stab at that, but I'm going to talk about the cultural zeitgeist in which Article 2 lives, probably more than the article itself, and I think that will be a little bit more informative, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to run our service too long. So, change is the only constant, and I invite you to stand as you are willing and or able. Stand in spirit, if not in body, for our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are, a classic adapted from a Rumi poem. 188. Ours is no caravan of despair. What a great line that is, isn't it? Lovely. Let's find a still spot in our hearts. I like to imagine prayer being a chance to drop down a rope ladder into the lowest part of your heart. Once upon a time, chemists believed they could transform lead into gold and death into life. We laugh, but are we not in the business of alchemy too? Turning loneliness into connection, pain into comfort, anger into solidarity, faith into action. The subtle magic of church combines love and justice to ideally create hope out of fear, transform individuals into a community. Here we engage in a holy alchemy, finding beauty in the ordinary and life in the present. Let's hold a stillness with that compelling mandate that we do that. It's a tradition in UU churches to come forward and share what's on your heart and mind, not a political diatribe, just the deepest things that are moving you in this last week. So I invite people to come forward and drop a stone and share with us what's on your hearts and minds, and I can also run the microphone out to people who might want to remain seated. In harm's way, in wars and in hurricanes and in the things that make life hard. Amen. Now from the profound to the not so profound. It's time for our offertory. And this month our offertory goes to the Nipmuc Development Corporation. And with it a silly story. So this is a non-historical story. Back in the days, this never happened, but I'm going to tell it like it did. The Pope there was a lot of Jewish people in Jerusalem and in Rome, and people were animated about that. Christians were getting started, and they wanted the city for themselves. Again, not a true story, and they were pressured to kick out all the Jewish people, which historically is sadly true. And the Pope said, "Okay, we'll give the Jews one chance to stay in the city, and you pick a nominee, and we'll grab a rabbi or someone." And they picked an old wise rabbi to debate the Pope. And since there was Latin and then there was Hebrew, they decided they would do the debate with pantomime. So they met in the center of the city, and they had two seats in this big stage, and everyone watched. And the Pope started, and the Pope stood up. And he basically put up three fingers. Most people thought it was to represent the Trinity, and he waved his fingers around. And then the rabbi stood up, and he held up his three fingers and pulled down two of them, and the Pope didn't know what to do. And then the next round, the Pope stood up, and he pointed to the heavens, and he put his finger all around. And then the rabbi stood up, and he took his finger and he put it right down on the ground. And it happened. And then the Pope was exasperated, and then the Pope pulled out the communion chalice and poured some wine and had a piece of bread. And the rabbi looked around, and he just pulled out of his pocket, pulled out an apple. The Pope. So they gather back to debrief what happened, and the Pope said, the rabbi had me at every turn. I held up 3 fingers to suggest that it was the Trinity, and he basically held up 1 finger to suggest that we're all under one God. And then he said, I waved my hands up to the heavens and said, we get our direction from heaven. And the rabbi pointed and said, but God is with us here too. And then he said, I came out, I didn't know what else to do, so I just poured communion. And then the rabbi brilliantly brought out an apple to suggest that we shared the original sin with Adam. I gave up. They debriefed the rabbi, and the rabbi said, he put up 3 fingers and waved him around. I assumed what he meant was that all the Jews need to leave, so I gave him the finger. And then, you like that one. And then I waved my finger in the air and said, God is up in heaven. And then the rabbi said, the rabbi thought that he was saying that all the Jews need to leave the city. And he said, we're staying right here. And then when he pulled out the communion, he goes, what did you do? He goes, I didn't know. I wasn't prepared for, I said, I didn't know what to do. So I thought he pulled out his lunch and I pulled out mine. Give generously for the life and work of this church. Stories won't normally be that silly. So, Article 2. Article 2 was basically designed to revise the guiding principles that guide us. That very unsexy name, Article 2, is really Article 2, Section 3 was the part that was voted on to be changed. I'll be compelled to say this again and again. This sermon is not really here to advocate for it or against it. It's basically to explain this important moment in broader terms of Unitarian Universalism for you. So whether you bless or curse the change, or whether it turns out to be good or bad, we really don't know. We do not know. But the UUA is mandated in order to be relevant, right? In a world where so many traditional religious traditions get bound up in their history, we mandated at the start back in 1961 that every 15 years or so when convenient, we would revise the bylaws in order to keep ourselves relevant. Forcing that kind of examination is designed to not be stagnant, right? So back in 2009, when it was sort of up again for revision, very little happened. I don't even remember that coming up for debate. I remember it being an issue and nothing really ever came about it. So this one was designed to, this one will not be so easily forgotten, right? So Article 2, regardless of whether one approaches it with an optimism or a pessimism, is designed to deal with our movement and make it relevant. No one really has a full grasp on what impact it will have, but it was passed by about 3/4 of the vote. It needed to be passed by 2/3 of a vote. And it most immediately, in the most surface kind of way, it will replace the first greeting we have with the world from the 7 principles, which some people felt like, well, they're broadly popular, but people felt like they're a little wordy for a something a little bit more easy or something a little bit more visual. So perhaps more important than how we choose to present ourselves to the world and how it is how we think about ourselves is attached to Article 2 as well. It moves us, at least to a degree, at least in its language, from us being a free gathering of congregations served by the UUA, to the UUA being a little bit more freed up to be something akin to an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, intentionally multicultural organization. That, just own that a little bit. You'll hear more about it. Said in a different way, Article 2 offers subtle but potentially important changes in the language that move Unitarian Universalism from being a church tradition steeped in the freedom of thought, steeped in the independence of our own conscience, to being a tradition more intentionally committed and accountable to being anti-racist, anti-oppressive, pro-liberation in all of its ways. That is the nature of what the change is behind the image and the 7 principles. If the mandated 15-year review of our bylaws is why you're listening to this boring sermon on polity now, the changes are being brought upon by energy that has been in the movement for some time. There's been an active energy within our tradition. The most energetic part of our tradition has been around those values of anti-racism, anti-oppression, pro-liberation, making us more inclusive. More inclusive, a little bit less autonomy and freedom of conscience, a little bit more intentionality with our mission. Okay? About 6 or 7 years ago, a couple of years before COVID, back in 1819, General Assemblies, the group started to explore this. They were asked to basically see if the 7 principles and the 6 sources that were still inspiring to the masses of Unitarian Universalists, and whether we wanted to revise that. So that process started 5 or 6 years ago, really kind of heated up 3 years ago. As information and drafts came in, they sort of began to adapt it. Revisions were made all along the way. In the early 2000s, there was something important that happened. They did another survey of our church group, and what came up was the idea that more than other churches, more than other nonprofits that would be akin to love, became a theme that UU spoke about more than anything else. So they knew that love was going to be an important kind of principle in the way it is, and love is now the center of those of the flower of other values like generosity and justice and such. If you've never been to GA, you might imagine that there's a lot of political debates about justice issues. We are, of course, a very positive, engaged in the world movement. And that process was largely, it was some of that debate at GA, but more of it was about whether we should reform ourselves to be a little bit more intentional in that way. So, in order to convey the spirit of the difference of opinion in here, I'm going to provide 2 rants. I'm not speaking for myself in this particular case. I'm going to put on 2 different stoles just to give it some image. All right? So, here's the rant that would be opposed to the Article 2 changes. Here we go. Are you kidding me? At the point in which our congregations, like nearly every other volunteer and donation-funded civic volunteer-led group in our country, are hemorrhaging money and resources and relevance, we're going to decide our time now is to revise very popular principles, the 7 principles, which we've been known for the last 50 years. This is what the leaders in our organization of churches made up predominantly by straight white liberals, nearly all over the age of 60, are proposing and suggest we focus on. Really? I don't have the statistics, but does everyone in the UUA that they hire have to be a person of color, or someone who identifies somewhere on the LGBT spectrum, or someone with a formal disability? I'm certain that I'll be critiqued for raising these issues as being oppressively racist. But it feels worth noting that the UUA has continually felt compelled to hire leaders and bring aboard ministers almost exclusively from identities disproportionate to those who sustain our churches. Let me ask you, what other leaders of any other organization committed to its own success or potentially even its own survival would ever choose to tie their hands to an agenda so antagonistic to the basic demographic that fills the ranks that they represent? The answer is obviously very few. A group of leaders more committed to asserting one angle or viewpoint as to how to make the world a better place than being in service to the organizations, to the churches that basically fund it. That's who. And I believe that although the UUA hardly prints stories in its publication, The World, about these matters, it might be interesting to see a story that highlights that at the same time we're hiring people from a variety of diverse identities, people are leaving the pews in record numbers. Certainly, no doubt COVID, no doubt broader social trends beyond our control are the far larger impactful involvements. And I know this is a little off topic regarding Article 2, but since we have become more intentionally anti-racist, oppressive, and intentionally welcoming, have large numbers of multicultural people join our churches? I don't think so. I know it sounds harsh, I know it will ruffle feathers, but it must be asked. Is our effort to be anti-racist, oppressive, and multicultural part of why we're shrinking? I don't suspect the answer to that is significantly in. Church attendance is down in almost every church tradition. But one thing is a fact. It certainly hasn't helped us grow. Although we live at a time right now when nearly every UU can identify that there are profound economic and cultural advantages to being white in America, and many, potentially even most UUs, are comfortable uttering the statement that, yes, we live in a white supremacist culture. That does not necessarily mean that most UUs mean we should transform our own internal culture as a church. The forces behind Article 2 think that it does. At the heart of why most UUs who are opposed to Article 2 is not because they don't believe that racism is real or that people with disabilities need a place to be. They believe that behind the scenes, there's a whole lot of other agenda. An agenda to remove the UUA from serving the congregations, not the other way around. Let all have ears to hear it. The changes proposed and voted on in Article 2 are not primarily about a poetic flower with love in the middle. They are primarily not about changing 7 words into an image. They are designed primarily to liberate UUA leaders from serving the congregations and the people that sit in them. That's a lot. So I'm going to close on an affirming note. I like the image of the flower. It truly is a little easier on the eyes than the 7 phrases, which, quite frankly, sound a little bit like Eleanor Roosevelt wrote them back in the 30s, which I'll give you as a cute way of saying that they're a little bit outdated. Fine. The real question is, underneath that flower, are there thorns? Is the flower a Trojan horse? The question I want to know is, the answer to is not whether there's something in an effort to edit out the portions of the words, but to why they chose "we the congregations of the UUA" to be removed from that debate. I'm concerned that just around the corner is whether the UUA can, under the banner of us being covenanted together, not encourage but essentially demand that congregations hold themselves accountable to the way that other churches and leaders find their programs acceptably anti-oppressive enough. Those concerned or opposed to Article 2 want to know if the real leaders behind the construction of the change in language, I want to know what they think they've won now that it's passed. Of course, I want to ask that big question that no one seems courageous to ask. Also, is this going to help our churches grow? Not in moral or political purity, but in real numbers? Is it fair, just, and responsible for the UUA to attempt for the first time ever to bind our historically free collection of churches to any particular agenda that's fixed, when we already have existing apparatus to vote and change and shift the way we politically are motivated? Why is it that a set of truly moral, important concerns, like anti-racism, like anti-oppressive acts, why are those more important than, say, ecological ones, right? Why are they more important an agenda for the UUA to follow than securing voting rights? Let me be very clear to those just checking in on what is now a past thing. The proposed changes that emphasize the collective and de-emphasize the individual, which is essentially largely what they do, which is something most UUs are in favor of, is a softer way of advertising that we wish to pull the language out that all of us have the freedom of our own individual beliefs. Let that one sit. At a time in which nearly all UUs would define themselves as opposed to oppression and racism in all its forms, the changes proposed demand that we do. By adding in accountability and covenanting together, Article 2 doesn't only demand that churches be opposed to racism and be anti-oppressive or believe in equitable ways. It potentially binds our hands that we must make individual choices in all of our churches to do so. Sit with that. Okay. New rant. Wow. Listen to him. I think you're bearing more of your own hidden agenda and imaginary fears than you're letting on. You truly did rise to the assignment of ranting, didn't you? You truly did just basically, wow, you went there. Trouble is, I don't think you're representing nearly as many people as you think you are. Number one, 4/5 of all the most engaged UUs at General Assembly voted for this. Don't forget that. See, I think the fact that your fears that people of color or people with disabilities or people with novel pronouns are taking over is real, is certainly more about you than it is about most UUs. When you were describing those in favor of Article 2, you seem to be trying to paint a picture that there's some kind of cabal of new UUs who've all recently arrived to steal your movement. I could almost hear your brain translating that the literally thousands of people who not only engaged in the long, painstaking effort to keep our tradition relevant are not really real UUs or normal UUs. See, I see what you're trying to do. As more and more UUs tune into this and get it integrated into their churches, you want to paint those UUs as not being very mainstream. Let me be clear. Everyone in the UUA or involved with the UUA is still, have no fear, aware that we're still a predominantly straight, predominantly white, cisgendered, middle-class group. They are. However, they are also the people who hang Black Lives Matter signs outside of almost all the UU churches, fight and push for police reform, and alongside that are trying to create a just and fair world that is systematically anti-oppressive. Article 2 steps us forward to try to guarantee that we're not hypocrites. Isn't your urgent yearning to put our values into action here on earth? Isn't that what makes cultural bar a little higher and forward-thinking as a church actually what we're known for more than the seven principles? Yeah. Isn't what draws people to our evolving commitment to justice and agile ability to move and be involved in any political issue that rises up the very nature of what makes us unique as a religious tradition? It is. It seems like you and your cries that your freedom is being curtailed, forget that. Have you forgotten that more than a church full of people who can believe anything they want? We're at our best and aspirational when we act, and act together. Those in favor of the changes written into Article 2 know that if we don't stand up for our values, if we don't come together as a small movement to have at least some kind of singular voice, we're really, honestly, just NIMBYs and the religious version of limousine liberals who don't want anything in their town or be infringed in their freedom. We're in this fall here, now that we're past this, thankfully granted the opportunity to finally, in a way we've never had before, acknowledge the centering of voices, the concerns and lost values of indigenous people, LGBTQ communities, etc. Let me ask you a hard question in response to all of your questions. If we don't move forward when given the opportunity presented us in Article 2, and we work with what we've passed, are we in a way not fulfilling our heritage as you used? And while we're talking about the past, you seem to think we're stepping away from and so revere. Have you forgot that our heritage always has, in the moment, called us to look not backwards, but forwards? As fun as empowering as it is to talk about our connection to Emerson and Thoreau and Sophia Lyon Faz, the real work is ahead. I think those opposed to the proposal that just past forgot a little that there isn't one UU leader that we revere that wasn't stepping forward in their time to speak to the values that pulled our society forward. Not one. Not one was revering the past. So why would we revere them rather than do the work that they compelled us to do? And to return to your suggestion that the changes made to Article 2 is a centerpiece of some kind of plot to ruin or steal your movement, that accusation is sad, spurious, irresponsible. Article 2 was voted on for years. Over the course of the work, the commission started and mailed out. It had 45 feedback sessions that it offered that were participated in by the end over 5,000 people, a not insignificant portion of our population. Moreover, videos that revolved Article 2 and the discussion around it were seen by just under 8,000 people. You failed to mention in your suggestion that our movement was under threat by being stolen away, that over the course of the process that took over 6 years to happen, no less than 29 different surveys were generated in preparation and assessment of this proposal. 11,000 respondents were involved in that. That's a pretty broad participation for something you seem to describe as a coup. So I asked those people at the con mic, as GA is always a con and a pro mic, if you were the ones that sat back and comfortable in your church with the idea that you would never have to change, and that you'd never be asked to do anything more to fight racism than admire Martin Luther King. Are you like so many, now only stepping up to throw your hands that your proposal lost? I know that Article 2 can with skeptical eyes sound like its name was stolen from a clandestine proposal from a sinister sci-fi Ray Bradbury alliance. It's a weird name. I'll give you that. I feel you. Article 2 does sound clandestine. It just is what the bylaws are. And it's really about ending complacency. require some level of restriction of someone's freedom for the collective good? If those who want to paint this as a debate between liberty and justice, I say, okay, that's fair. Article 2 is about committing our principles of justice over our freedom. Article 2 is nothing more than an effort to hold ourselves internally accountable to nearly every political change and social justice movement we've been in favor of our entire movement's history. So, there we go. That's the nature of the gestalt of the situation we face. If I were to expand on those voices, I'm out of character now. If I was to expand those voices, it might guide us forward by asking speculatively whether the proposed revision honors or dishonors our ancestors who built our churches. I would ask you to pause and give that a moment of thought. Which path is our true heritage? It's unclear. Which path leads us to our strongest future as a movement? It's unclear. This sermon has no conclusion because, as we know as you use, the future is open and it is ours to shape. Somebody asked Olga who gets left behind, and from that she came up with this song.
Yeah, Stephanie, I will cue you, okay? Don't rush.
And now for a song we can all sing. I invite you to stand as you are willing and or able, stand in spirit, not in body, for forward through the ages 114. That's the hymn they sing at almost all the ordinations of ministers, right? Carry on. Bruce Selfworth says, in our hungering for meaning, in our aching for friendship, in our yearning for justice, may we look deep within the mystery of things and gather our strength. May each of us proclaim as one of God's spies